Welcome to the Den, the Dark Entertainment Network. I am that Rose Noir, and this is the haunted history of Hollywood. Welcome back, dear fiends of the Den. I am that Rose Noir, back in the Den, back on the mic here at the Dark Entertainment Network, bringing you more haunted history of Hollywood. So let's continue through the Roaring Twenties, the Golden Age of Hollywood, and the beginning of the talkies. I believe in kismet, divine timing, because I had left off this last episode with a trivia question. And the other day, I was watching Antiques Roadshow, where a woman brought in a 1927 reel from the movie The Jazz Singer. It was perfectly intact, and it was the reel where the sound matched the movie and the images on the movie for the first time, where Al Jolson sang to his mother, a very poignant moment in this movie. And this reel still exists, and the fact that it is from the first talkie is just absolutely amazing. And it was valued at $25,000. So finding that episode of Antiques Roadshow and realizing how rare so much of early Hollywood really is. So many reels that have gone missing due to time and age that were destroyed. So, some of the rarest old Hollywood memorabilia are original screen used props and costumes and early Hollywood studio contracts. Also, there's a rarity of authentic autographs from silent film stars because these things were never preserved. They were destroyed after production or only existed in limited numbers. Now, I watch a lot of classic horror movies, and we were watching The Fly and The Return of the Fly with Vincent Price. Now, these movies were made 1 year apart, but they depicted several years down the line. And the studio, which was Kurt Newman, saved the original set where the original Fly wrote "Love You" on a chalkboard. And when they went back into his his laboratory years later, his son "Love You" was still written there. So they had saved all of these props to use again to show that this laboratory had never been used. But after that, what happened? It was destroyed. Now, this was 1958, so earlier than that, pretty much everything was destroyed. So, screen used props and costumes originally worn by icons like Marilyn Monroe, and we know that Kim Kardashian destroyed that dress. And Greta Garbo, things from James Dean are incredibly rare, and props from landmark films like Casablanca, Letters, or The Wizard of Oz ruby slippers, which a pair had been stolen and recovered. And it was actually Josh Gates on Expedition Unknown that recovered these ruby slippers. But so many things were discarded after filming, and now the movies are classics, and these things, if any exist, are worth so much. And as I have said, Hollywood history is American history. There is nothing more American made than Hollywood. There are also things like autographs from Clara Bow, Rudolph Valentino, who was my grandmother's favorite silent film actor, and Lon Chaney, senior, not junior. Then there's a lack of publicity stills and signed photos from the silent era, and these are highly sought after because so few survived, because the studio archiving practices were not what they are today. Just like contracts, original contracts from Warner Brothers and MGM, or internal newsletters and correspondence signed by multiple stars between the years of 1939 and 1940. Warner Brothers newsletter was signed by 23 major stars, and that sold for $2,000. for 23 major star signatures from 1939 to 1940. So these things are rare because stars hardly ever did these things. And, you know, their images were controlled so much that rarely a glimpse was gotten. Now with social media, we get glimpses of stars all the time, and of course those who pay off the paparazzi to follow them around. And then of course there are those who want the most personal items: clothing, jewelry, letters, journals, scripts, these one of a kind items that were so close and personal and sacred to any of these old stars of the 1920s. I mean, even later than that, but silent film stars and their items are so very rare because the they were fragile. So paper is very fragile, film stock fragile, and textiles deteriorate very quickly without preservation. And in the early 1900s, preservation wasn't the best. There wasn't refrigeration in the 1920s. There were ice boxes. And then studios would destroy or recycle costumes and props a lot to save money. So something could have been used 3 or 4 times in a movie. It became famous for movie A, but the other movies not so much, but it had been worn so much and discarded. Then, a handful of items were made for premieres or promotional campaigns. So they only went to certain movie theaters, not every movie theater. And maybe small town movie theaters got different promotional items. So anything that has autographs, anything that has intimate photos or intimate items, people collect. And it's creepy and it's morbid, and I absolutely love it. So let's check out last week's trivia question and get to a brand new one. Here's another bit of trivia for you from the 1920s, the rise of the talkies. What was the name of the first feature-length film with synchronized dialogue released in 1927 that marked the beginning of the talkie era? A. Metropolis. B. The Jazz Singer. C. Wings. Or D. Sunrise. Here's a hint. I've already done a podcast about it, so look through the haunted history of Hollywood, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode in the Den. Like I said, synchronicity, it is so odd, but the answer to that trivia question is The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson. And if you pop back to the beginning of this episode, you can hear me talk about what I saw on Antiques Roadshow, and there is a short about it. So now let's get to another trivia question. All right, here we are again at the next trivia time, and today's question is: which silent film star's personal costumes and jewelry are considered among the rarest and most expensive surviving artifacts from 1920s Hollywood? Is it A. Clara Bow, B. Rudolph Valentino, C. Gloria Swanson, or D. Douglas Fairbanks? Tune in to the next Haunted History of Hollywood and find out. And thank you so much for joining me in the Den. And yes, I am still demonetized here in the Den. So if you would like to support my work and keep it in the shadows, there is a paypal.me link in the description. But as always, your view, your like, and your comment mean more than you will ever know. Again, thank you so much for joining me here in the Den, the Dark Entertainment Network, where the news meets conspiracy theories, makes babies in my brain, and it comes out my mouth. No, I'm not going to stop. If you have any stories you'd like to share, would like to be a guest in the Den, please email me at welcometothedenpodcast@gmail.com. Must be 21 and over. And if you like dark, creepy stories as much as I do here in the den, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And as always, thank you for joining me here at the Dark Entertainment Network.